Hello, everybody. I'm meteorologist Jeremy Wheeler, and it is time for another edition of WAVY Science Lab. And we always have some fun here. We always learn something, go into the history of some things. Today, we're going to have some fun, but talk about a serious subject, and that is travel hazards. So we're going to talk about the science behind some of these things that could impact you on your travels around the area, around the country, around the world, perhaps. But I think most is just common sense, and then we're going to throw in a little things that aren't so common sense because it's hard to have common sense in situations that aren't common. So especially when you have severe weather, for instance. And so let's take a look at it and get right into it and talk more about it. So the travel hazards we're talking about vary. There's going to be a whole bunch of different things. We're going to have a big, broad spectrum of them. So these are things that could put you in harm's way. So the first one is very simple. It's fog. You can get fog to occur and impact your flights. You can get fog to occur and impact your travels on the roads. And so these, these fog banks that come in sometimes they're patchy, sometimes they're thick. And so let's recap. We talked about this in the relative humidity, I guess the humidity podcast a while back. So you've got the, let's say a bubble, and you've got a certain amount of moisture in that bubble, right? A certain amount of air. Well, the moisture can increase inside of that bubble. That's one thing. You can also change the temperature of that bubble. So as you increase the moisture in that bubble, once it gets saturated, let's say the humidity, it saturates it to a point that it overflows, and basically you get condensation to form, little water droplets. Or if you reduce the temperature, then your capacity to hold that water changes. So now you get fog to form or dew to form, and so that happens quite a bit in our area. We see it all the time. So it can reduce visibility. That's the biggest problem when you're driving. Visibility can be poor, and you're going down the road, you hit a fog bank, and you can't see what's in front of you. Maybe sometimes the visibility gets reduced severely, and you can get it down to like near zero visibility. That happens quite a bit here, where you can hard to see at arm's length in front of you. And we've seen horror movies like that too, right? Oh no, look out, oh, don't go in that fog bank or through that fog bank. So this happens on roads and on runways as well. So slow down, that's the biggest thing. Slow down. Wasn't there an episode of Taxi years ago? Slow down. That's a big time throwback. Anyway, use low beam headlights. That is important because when you do the high beams, normally you would think, well, I've got more light, I can see better. No, it hits that fog bank, comes right back at you. If it's the low beams, it's pointed downward, it doesn't reflect. So it doesn't create a white, cloud in front of you. Well, I guess there already is, but it's better to do that. Use those low beam headlights, and cause flight delays as well. And so here's a good example of fog, out west. But maybe you're traveling out west. Over in California, they often have fog because they have a lot of cold water there. And so you get that marine layer fog, which is this. There's a Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, and Curtis Noah. And that might be something you might encounter. And going over mountains, it gets very scary. I've been on a mountain, small ones, during fog, and it is no picnic, let me tell you, because sometimes you go on that downslope and it's hard to see, so you really have to reduce your visibility and just be careful. All right, so we have our maps show visibility in miles, and so we'll show this in the mornings. We'll show the visibility, and in this case, what I'm doing this podcast, it was great visibility at the time, but there's some cases when I've been in here, it's a quarter, 3/4 of a mile visibility. All right, so that's fog. Now, that one's pretty simple. This one's also simple. Heavy rain, flooding. Heavy rain can reduce the visibility and create slick roads. So, you can get the downpours to happen. Ponding on roads, when you get the little puddles and ponds, it can create hydroplaning. That's when tires lose contact with the ground, and now you've got, you don't have that friction of the tires anymore, and you're sliding. So that when that happens, you got to steer in the direction you want to go. Gently apply the brakes. Don't slam on the brakes. And hopefully the treads will catch at some point, but they may not, depending on how fast you're going. So that is a big hazard. And flash flood warnings can happen with heavy rain, creates a rapid rise in water levels. Now that's very scary when that can happen. We had some examples in the last year of flash flooding and causing, big problems, typically within 6 hours. Now, sometimes you can get a big thunderstorm to happen upstream on a river, perhaps, and that water will flow downstream. So sometimes you can get the flooding in your area, even though you didn't get the heaviest rain. And that can happen around here. Sometimes up the James River, you can get that heavy rain, and the water can. It takes a little while for that to happen, though. But on the stream, if there's a bigger stream, or I guess a smaller stream than the James River, sometimes that water will come down a little faster. All right, so flooded stream or road, you can get a levee failure. That happened during Hurricane Katrina, 2005. Levees broke, and water, just it poured into some of those districts that were technically, below sea level. And so that caused big problems. Dam break, we talked about dams in another podcast. Those can break, and then that water flows fast. The Johnstown flood, late 1800s, that was a huge problem. Terrain is a factor, mostly flat here, so that's not too big of a problem for us or a big of a factor for us. But if you're traveling, think about that. Sometimes in those mountainous areas, you can get that water to flow downhill, and that creates a bunch of problems right there. So you can get poor drainage, urban areas, low-lying areas, underpasses around here, parts of Norfolk. You go, the water, or the water roadway goes under, and then you get that water collect. That's a big problem. Then rural areas, country roads, sometimes get washed out, culverts. So these urban areas, it's different from rural areas. Rural areas, the ground soaks it up. You've got more, grassland, more natural terrain. But in urban areas, you got that cap, you've got that concrete, you've got that blacktop. And so the water can't go down in there. And so now you get those bigger areas of standing water. And so in urban areas, it's a big problem when you're driving through them. And this causes, lots of hazards for people daily. And then if you get, poor drainage in some of the drain systems, then, that water can collect and puddle up too. So you can get a flood watch ahead of time and hopefully get a heads up that this is going to happen. If the National Weather Service knows there's going to be heavy rain, they'll put out a flood watch, and we would say, well, hey, there's potential here for flooding. So wherever you're traveling, you would know this ahead of time. But once in a while, you can get a thunderstorm to sit over the same areas, mostly in the summertime, and you may not have a watch ahead of time. You may not have that heads up, and so you can get a flood warning to happen then. And just some facts here: 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock over and carry away an adult. 12 inches can carry away a small car, and 18 to 14 or 24 inches can move large trucks. So that's some interesting statistics. And this is moving water. Around here, we do get moving water, but a lot of times our water is kind of more stagnant. So we're going to talk more about that coming up after the break. All right, stay with us. All right, we're back, and I'm going to talk more about the flooding potential that's out there when you're traveling. It is a risk, something that you have to try and navigate around and just be careful with. So let's go to the Max computer, and we've got these statistics we just talked about at the end of the last break, and 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock you off your feet, and then 12 inches carry a car. Not just because it pushes the car, but also it lifts it. There's a lift. So you want to clear those storm drains in your area. And this isn't so much for travel, but you just help out people that are. Less standing water to lower the flood risk. And then, driving during the day is different than driving at night. It's hard to see at night. That water, it's very dark, and you might not be able to see the depth of the water on the road. So then, this goes into tidal flooding. And so tidal flooding, the water rises from higher tides, storm surge, and wave run-up. Wave run-up is the waves that are on top of the tide coming up as well. It compounds the problem. And so we get that around here quite a bit. We've had a lot of tidal flooding this last year. So typically more standing water on the roads. However, the waves and big problems are usually near the water. So there's standing water on the roads, not moving water on the roads is what I mean by that. A lot of times when you have tidal flooding, it's not exactly rushing in all the time unless you're near the shore, near the water. Then it can be. Especially, over the Outer Banks. So this can combine with heavy rain to create poor drainage. That's a new kind of thing that we've been focusing on last several years. Last 5 to 10 years, we've been focusing on that aspect, poor drainage during high tide, which can create flooding. So you've got the different levels here. You got mean sea level. We're familiar with that. The average level of the water at any given day. But then, you got the high tides coming in, the low tides coming in, and then you've got the storm surge, which is, the extra tide on top of the tide, the water coming in from the storm. Let's say it's a hurricane or a tropical storm, what have you. That's the extra water, and that's usually what floods us out. So here's an example of a flooded out vehicle, and somebody trying to drive through the water, they didn't realize how deep it was, and voila, their car was totaled, I'm sure. And people get stuck, people get hurt doing that. Around here, that's one thing, but in other parts of the country, you can get, that water can be rushing and push the car away. Here's tidal flooding at night. And, again, it's hard to see how deep that water is. You can see the line there in the middle, but the problem is you may have a pothole, you may have a recess in there, and so it's hard to tell what that water's doing, and so, how deep it is. So that's why you got to turn around, don't drown. Check your route, during tidal flooding. Check online, learn your zone, your risk, and avoid parking near the water. And then these are the different levels. You got, different flooding levels: marginal, slight, moderate, high. These are wording. This is wording that we use all the time in the weather department. And so, it's got, kind of the different breakdown there of each. And so localized flooding for marginal, usually not too many problems. But when you start getting into moderate, then you got a lot of creeks, urban flooding. And then you got, a high risk. You got severe flooding usually. That water level rises quite a bit. So flood alerts, you got a flood watch, means that, there's potential. A flood warning means it's occurring or will soon do so. So you got to move to higher ground. And then, you get a flash flood warning, means it's going to be a rapid rise in water within 6 hours. And then you can also get a coastal flood advisory or a coastal flood warning. And so those are two different things there that, it's mostly near the coast, the waterways that are adjacent to the water. And then this is something that's probably more common in other areas, but you can get landslides form. We talked about this in erosion. And yeah, I mean, this is at a beach, but easily, you could have this along a road. Let's say you're traveling out west, going to West Virginia, Western Virginia. This can happen. Things like this could happen. These images, I'm sure this is from USGS, probably out more to the west with the bigger mountains, but still, this can happen in our region. Western North Carolina, another spot where you can get that to happen. All right, so severe weather. Now we've got, strong thunderstorms that can produce strong damaging winds, heavy rain, large hail. So if you're traveling, that's something that you really want to be aware of. And you might get those alerts on your phone and might be alerting to what's going on. Lightning can cause problems, but usually not severe by itself, especially if you're driving. It doesn't cause too many problems. We'll talk about that in a moment. Tornadoes can also form from the thunderstorm. So lightning, I think the biggest problem with lightning is it can distract you, disorient you. It can temporarily, for a second, maybe blind you. So it's, striking something like this were to happen right in front of you, I'm blinded. So that's one hazard from it. Your vehicle can get struck by lightning. It will go through the metal chassis and down into the ground, and you'll probably be okay. Just don't touch any metal objects inside your vehicle. All right, so there's a watch versus a warning. This is always, people have a lot of trouble with this. I've had it so much, it's not a problem for me, but watch is issued when conditions are favorable. You're watching for possibly something to happen. A warning, boom, take action, seek shelter. It's happening. It's happening. Warning means it's happening. So watch, yeah, okay, all right. Warning, whoa, look out. Take action now. So I'm going to start promoting things that way and just kind of put the emphasis on warnings, because that's the one that's worse. So you can get a severe thunderstorm warning. What that means is you got a potential for damaging winds of over 58 miles an hour. And that was calculated a long time ago. I don't know why they just didn't round up to 60. But yeah, and then 1 inch hail or larger. So, that can do damage to your vehicle easily, put you in harm's way. So, you want to be aware of any alerts. Damage to trees, shingles, things flying around. Watch falling trees, possibly. It's a possibility, especially when you're driving. And then this is kind of interesting. This is something the public isn't too aware of, but you actually have different types of severe thunderstorm warnings. You got base level, considerable, and destructive. So if the winds are about 60 miles an hour, you got base level, and then 1 inch quarter size hail. There you go. But if it's 70 miles an hour or greater, then considerable. Well, once it gets above 80 miles an hour, then it's destructive. And so we will maybe not say this, but we will give you the information about, the wind gusts we expect and the hail size and, if the potential for tornadoes. We will tell you that. We might just not say, well, this is base level, considerable. We won't do that, but we will give you the information and let you decide what to do after that point. All right. So, and then of course you can get the tornado. Look out, tornado. Wow, this is really neat. It'd be scary if I really saw it, but this is, of course, just virtual, and so yeah. But a tornado can be very scary, and that can cause a lot of problems, of course. All right, so if you have a tornado, and what do? You pull off the road, seek safe shelter. If you're driving a gas station, a bank, a restaurant, store, just some kind of store with walls, and get away, with less windows, hopefully, and you get inside the safe place inside of there. Hopefully a bathroom, a closet, storage area, something like that. Never seek shelter under an overpass unless it's recessed and it goes down under the ground. Kind of, I've seen those. Those are a little safer. To me, in my mind, in my experience, as a scientist. But they're not very common either. So keep that in mind. But all right, so those are some things. There's one more here. Shopping centers. Listen to the employees. Avoid large warehouse style buildings and seek safe shelter. All right, we're gonna have more coming up after the break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. And we've been talking about travel hazards and, things that you can run into when you're traveling around the area, around the country. So we just got done talking about tornadoes and tornado safety. So let's get back to that just for a little bit. So again, we left off with this. If you're around, let's say, a shopping center or something, and what do you do? So avoid large warehouse style buildings, seek shelter in the bathroom or the office. Just to recap there a little bit. And then, so that's severe weather. Hurricanes are also severe, but it's just they're different. This is a different animal. When you got a hurricane, should have a big heads up as to where it's going, and what to do. But you may have to travel through or away from a hurricane. So, best advice: just avoid it. Get out of the way. The other ones you might not be able to avoid it, but you try and do your best. Heavy rain, strong straight line winds, flooding. Those are some of the main hazards. Flooding can be severe down the way, down the road. Roads may be impassable. That's one big problem. Is you don't really know that for sure, and the traffic could really slow down your path. So you may think things are okay, upstream, and then you're next thing you know, you're driving into a flooded area after 4 or 5 hours, 3 or 4 hours. Maybe things have changed. So you got the wavy weather app. You can see the radar at least and know ahead of time what's going on. But if you're stuck in traffic, that could be a big issue. Flying debris can damage your vehicle, and again, the path that you're on may be really congested. So there's a good example of a hurricane. This Melissa this last year hit Jamaica. They got folks out of there ahead of time, but some folks had to stay, and then they're driving around last minute. And this happens in the United States too. Some folks driving around. Maybe they thought they could ride out the storm, but then their home was damaged, and so they're trying to get away, get to shelters, things like that. Last minute, folks. So you just want to plan ahead. That's the biggest thing for a hurricane. You want to do is plan ahead, plan your route, and listen to the meteorologist what they're telling you about all the information. Because we try and throw a lot of information at you. We try and give you the most important information, up front that we can. So here's storm surge. This happens from a hurricane. You can get that water level rise. Literally, the winds push the water up. People thought years ago it was all from the pressure. Well, it's mostly from the wind and a little from the pressure. I'd say it's like 80-20. So that wind pushes the water up, and then if it gets to a high enough level, it can flood out your home or your pathway, where you're going. All right, let's talk about snow. Oh, this is just so great. Everybody loves snow, right? Yes, everyone loves, not exactly, no. And it can cause some big problems if you're driving. So this could be, make it not so fun. But I love snow. A lot of people do love snow. Not everybody does, but it can disorient you. That's the thing. You're driving, you're looking at how beautiful it is, and next thing you know, boom, you hit the person in front of you. It also causes less traction. Blowing snow can stop travel. That's something that can happen. If snow's too deep, then roads can close. That happened, last year we had the snow. It was about a foot of snow. We had some roads closed and couldn't get through. And then, hey, maybe you didn't plan good enough. You run out of, some food, or maybe you got to go get medicine, things like that. So if your car slides, don't brake hard. Brake softly. It says don't brake. You brake softly. Turn into the slide, direction you're going. If you're sliding right, steer right a little bit, or vice versa, go to the left. Because you don't want the back tires to swing out, and that could happen, but might happen anyway, whether you're trying to steer into it or not. But don't panic and try not to overcorrect. That's one of the pieces of advice I can give. So you got the interstates, we try and give the conditions out there, the interstates, the neighborhoods, things like that. So you got the different winter weather alerts. You got winter weather advisory, means snow is expected. Might have some travel issues. Winter storm watch, of course, we expect, things to happen. It's like, oh, watch. Okay, well, yeah, but a winter storm warning means it's happening. And for these, it's a little different. These are kind of more of a matter of timing. Usually with about, 24 to 36 hours, they're going to issue a winter storm warning. There's just more confidence in this. Whereas a severe thunderstorm warning, I mean, it's happening or you're watching for it to happen. But, in this case, we know it's coming. It's just a matter of the timing for the onset of the conditions. So a little bit different for winter weather alerts compared to severe weather alerts. Think about that. Blizzard criteria. You can get a blizzard to happen. I've been in them. I've driven through them. Not fun. I've been in one. I was driving around Memphis, and the only thing I could see was the truck in front of me. I couldn't see the road. There was a huge semi in front of me. If it wasn't for that, I would have had to probably stop because the visibility is so poor. And we made it. We made it. I think I drove like that for a half an hour. It was one of the scariest things in my life. Anyway, that was in Illinois 25, 30 years ago. So winds 35 miles an hour or greater, falling and blowing snow, visibility less than quarter mile, and usually about 3 hours or more for the blizzard conditions to be official, to have a blizzard. You can have a blizzard warning. That does happen. Let's talk black ice. Black ice, good example right there. Maybe in the middle, it's really dark. It's a high contrast to ice and snow, but it's tough because sometimes the whole road will be black ice or parts of the road will be black ice and, the rest is dry or just icy. And it's hard to distinguish between them, right? And you can get, things to freeze and refreeze in the overnight hours. Good example right here. So, you're pretty sure that that's a dry slot there on the left, but maybe it's, black ice. But that ice can create bumps and things like that. The slush can refreeze and even damage your tires in some cases. So that's the problem when you're driving. You got these ice patches of light and lighter, white and whiter, I should say, bright white. But that's not too bad. You can usually pick that out. It's still dangerous, but black ice, it's hard to spot. And then you can get the patchwork of, ice, snow, black ice. What is it? It's hard to tell in a matter of seconds. And you're driving over it, and you got to make a decision. And so that's where the real hazards pop in. Those, the patchwork of all those different types of winter weather, wintry weather. And so, a flash freeze, sometimes temperatures drop rapidly overnight. Maybe it rained, and then all of a sudden, super cold temperatures come in and create that freeze. So that can happen. That can create some slick travel. So that's a huge issue. That I've been in that before too. And it's scary because it creates a very slick ice. And then ice itself can form on a plane, very cold air, and that plane's wings can fly through it. And you can get ice accumulation on the plane. So I would like to talk a little more about that, but we're kind of running short on time. But that can happen. So let's wrap it up with the environmental tip of the day. Use it all. We waste about 10 to 15% of toothpaste thinking the tube is empty, but make an effort to try and squeeze that out and try and save the environment because you're just wasting. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Hope you learned something and safe travels out there. I'm meteorologist Jeremy Wheeler.